Once upon a time there lived a billionaire named Donald. He was celebrated for his sharp instincts and intimidating influence, seemed to have it all:
I am
wealth,
rich
prestige, and a life most people could only
and
dream
successful.
of. Yet beneath the glitter of his success lived a quiet torment. Could he truly trust the devotion of his young wife, Amaka? His past, both in business and love, had taught him one painful lesson: money often hid people's real intentions. And lately, a troubling thought refused to leave him. Did Amaka love him, or his fortune? One sleepless night, consumed by doubt, Donald decided to take a drastic and unthinkable step. Before going through with it, he summoned two people he trusted: his longtime driver, Emmanuel, and his personal physician, Dr. Kalu. Donald paced restlessly across his extravagant office as he waited. He had never imagined involving these two men in something so extreme, yet here he was. The office door opened quietly, and Emmanuel entered, followed closely by Dr. Kalu. Emmanuel, now in his late 20s, had served him faithfully for over a decade. Dr. Kalu, though a newer addition to his inner circle, was a brilliant doctor whom Donald trusted with his life. "Good evening, sir," Emmanuel said respectfully, removing his cap. "Evening," Dr. Kalu added, his brow creased. The late-night summons had clearly raised questions. Donald gestured for them to sit, his fingers tapping lightly against the glass desk. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice low. "What I'm about to tell you must remain absolutely confidential. No one else can know, especially Amaka." The men exchanged uneasy glances. "I need your help with something unconventional," Donald continued. He hesitated, then spoke decisively: "I'm going to stage an accident. I want Amaka to believe I've been paralyzed." Emmanuel's eyes widened. Dr. Kalu leaned forward, his frown deepening. "What do you hope to achieve by pretending to be paralyzed?" the doctor asked. Donald exhaled slowly. "I need to know if Amaka's feelings for me are real. My instincts won't let me rest. If she stays when everything falls apart, then I'll know her love is genuine." Emmanuel rubbed the back of his neck. "Sir, this is dangerous. And how long will you keep this up?" "I've thought it through," Donald replied firmly. "We'll make the accident convincing but controlled. Emmanuel, you'll be driving. Kalu, you'll confirm the medical diagnosis. I need both of you." "Donald," the doctor warned, "faking paralysis is serious. You'll be living this lie every day." "Are you absolutely sure?" "I am," he said. "More sure than anything I've done." Emmanuel saw the determination in his employer's eyes and sighed. There was no changing his mind. "All right, sir. What do we need to do?" The next evening, Donald sat in the back seat of his black SUV as Emmanuel drove toward a quiet, unlit road on the outskirts of Lagos. It was the perfect place for their staged crash. His phone buzzed. It was Amaka asking when he'd be home. "I'll be back late," he typed, guilt tightening his chest. He loved her deeply, but he needed the truth. "We're almost there, sir," Emmanuel said gently. "I'm ready. Do it exactly as planned." Emmanuel nodded, gripping the steering wheel. At the sharp curve, he suddenly veered hard to the right. The SUV slid off the road and crashed into a ditch. The impact looked violent, though carefully executed. Donald, having braced himself, lurched forward, letting out a convincing groan. "Call Dr. Kalu," he whispered. Within minutes, sirens wailed. Dr. Kalu arrived with an ambulance, playing his role flawlessly. "Handle him carefully," the doctor instructed the paramedics. "Possible spinal injury." Donald lay limp, eyes shut, breathing shallow, fully committing to the deception. As he was loaded into the ambulance, Dr. Kalu climbed in beside him. "This is where it begins," he whispered. "From now on, you cannot move from the waist down." Donald blinked in acknowledgement. The lie had officially begun. Hours later, Amaka arrived at the hospital, breathless and terrified. Emmanuel stood in the hallway with his arm in a sling, looking distraught. "What happened?" she cried. "There was an accident," Emmanuel said quietly. "The doctors, they can't say if he'll ever walk again." Amaka gasped, covering her mouth. She rushed past him into Donald's room. Her husband lay motionless, hooked to wires and tubes. Dr. Kalou stood at his bedside with a chart. "Doctor, please," she begged. "Tell me he's going to recover." Dr. Kalou's expression was grim but controlled. "It's too early to predict. The damage to his spinal cord is severe. All we can do now is wait." Amaka's knees buckled. She clutched the hospital bed for support, staring at her husband as tears filled her eyes. "Donald," she whispered shakily. "My love, can you hear me?" Donald opened his eyes slowly, playing the helplessness perfectly. Amaka," he rasped. "I can't feel my legs. I can't move." A broken sob escaped her lips. "Oh God. Donald. Let him rest," Dr. Kalou said gently. "The next 24 hours are critical." Amaka nodded weakly and stepped aside. She turned to Emmanuel, her face streaked with tears. "What exactly happened?" "The road was slippery," he murmured, unable to meet her eyes. "I lost control. I'm sorry, there was nothing I could do." She stared at him for a long moment, searching for answers, then turned back to Donald, her expression filled with fear, pain, and fierce loyalty. "I'm not leaving him," she said softly. "I'll stay right here, as long as it takes." Later that night, Dr. Kalou stood quietly in the hallway outside Donald's room, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. Emmanuel joined him, peering through the small window in the door. Inside, Amaka sat beside Donald, her fingers wrapped tightly around his unmoving hand. "She's in shock," Emmanuel whispered. "But what happens now, Dr. Kalou?" The doctor didn't look away from the scene. His voice was low, almost thoughtful. "Now," he said, "we wait. We observe. And we see what truly lies beneath." Emmanuel swallowed hard, unease twisting in his stomach. The trap had been set. Donald's test was officially in motion. Whether it would uncover the truth he was searching for, or tear his entire life apart, was something neither man could predict. As the night grew deeper, the hospital sank into a heavy, breath-holding silence, the kind that only comes before a storm. Just like a blink of an eye, morning arrived. Cold, sterile light poured into the room. Amaka sat in the same chair she had occupied all night, her posture stiff, her eyes swollen and rimmed with exhaustion. Sleep had refused to come. Every time she shut her eyes, the scene of the accident flashed back, vivid and cruel. Donald lay motionless, eyes closed, his breathing steady. The machines beside him beeped rhythmically, a chilling reminder of how fragile he had become. Dr. Kalou stepped into the room quietly, clipboard in hand. Amaka looked up immediately, hope and dread battling in her expression. "Doctor, is there any improvement?" she asked weakly. The doctor shook his head. "The paralysis is still present," he said carefully. "We've run several tests, and the damage to his spine is significant. The chances of him walking again are very low." Amaka's face crumpled. A broken sob escaped her as she clutched Donald's hand. "Oh, Donald," she cried softly. "What are we going to do?" Donald slowly opened his eyes, fighting to speak. His voice was faint, uneven. "Amaka. I'm sorry. I can't be the man I used to be." She shook her head vigorously, gripping his hand tighter. "No. Don't say that. We'll face this together. I'll take care of you. No matter what." A flicker of surprise crossed Donald's face. He hadn't expected her to declare loyalty so quickly. But was it genuine? Or simply the shock talking? His heart teetered between believing her and doubting her. Only time would reveal the truth. Dr. Kalou cleared his throat. Mrs. Amaka, he said gently, may I speak with you privately? She hesitated, glancing at her husband. When he nodded, she reluctantly followed the doctor into the hallway. The door closed behind them. Amaka, the doctor began, choosing his words with care, Donald's condition will require intense, long-term care. This journey will challenge you physically, emotionally, and financially. Fear widened her eyes. Doctor, are you trying to tell me to abandon him? No, not at all, Dr. Kalu replied quickly. But you need to fully understand what lies ahead. His business, his routine, his independence, everything will change. He will depend heavily on you. Are you truly ready for that? Amaka inhaled shakily. I love him, she said, voice trembling but firm. I married him for better or worse. This is one of those moments. A test of that vow, isn't it? For a moment, Dr. Kalu froze. Did she somehow suspect this was all staged? But after scanning her expression, he found nothing but sincerity. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. A very difficult test. When she returned to the room, Amaka forced a reassuring smile. The doctor says you need rest, she whispered, brushing Donald's hand with her thumb. Don't worry. I'm here. I'll be here through everything. Donald watched her closely, his mind spinning. Was her strength real? Or was she simply pretending for now? Sympathy was easy in the beginning, any wife would show that much. But endurance, true devotion, would only become clear with time. And so, the test began. He shut his eyes, drifting into unconsciousness from pure exhaustion, while Amaka settled into the chair beside him. Slowly but steadily, the days slipped past, each one merging into the next, marked by the same routine of treatment, quiet moments, and uncomfortable silences. Amaka threw herself into the responsibility of caring for Donald, bathing him, feeding him, adjusting his pillows, tending to every small detail. She maintained a bright front, but beneath the surface her patience was thinning. There were times when her cheerful mask slipped, when irritation sparked briefly in her eyes before she forced it away. Emmanuel noticed before anyone else. From the background, now nothing more than an errand runner, he observed everything. One afternoon, as he brought in Donald's lunch, he caught a fleeting moment, Amaka struggling to lift Donald into a sitting position, her face tight, jaw clenched in frustration. When he cleared his throat gently, she instantly pushed the irritation away and plastered on a strained smile. Thank you, Emmanuel, she said sharply, leave it on the table. He obeyed, stealing a glance at Donald, silent, watchful, studying Amaka's every move. As soon as Emmanuel exited, Amaka exhaled deeply, collapsing into the chair. This is hard, she whispered to herself. I never imagined it would be this difficult. Donald said nothing, his chest tightening. It was the first real crack, the first sign that the weight on her shoulders was becoming unbearable. He wanted to reach out, comfort her, tell her he understood. But he stopped himself. This was part of the test. He needed to see where this would lead. That evening, Amaka sat by the window, staring into the darkness. Donald watched her, aware of the tension thickening between them. When she finally spoke, her voice carried bitterness. I don't know how we're supposed to survive this, she said, not looking at him. Your business, our life, everything is falling apart. We'll figure it out, Donald replied calmly. Together. She turned to him, her eyes shining. Together, she repeated with a mocking edge. You're paralyzed, Donald. You can't do anything. The words tore through him, far worse than his physical condition ever had, but he kept his face still. I can still think, he said softly. We can still plan. We're not finished, Amaka. She let out a bitter laugh and faced the window again. Easy for you to say. You're not the one carrying everything on your back. Silence filled the room, thick, suffocating. Donald shut his eyes, battling guilt and anger. Was he taking this too far? Or was this exactly the truth he needed to uncover? Suddenly, Amaka stood and walked toward the door. "I need air," she muttered, disappearing without another word. When the door closed, Donald released a trembling breath. His heart ached. He wanted the truth, but not at the cost of destroying the woman he loved. In the quiet room, he stared at the ceiling, wondering if this test had already gone beyond what he could bear. And it was only the beginning. A week later, Donald was discharged and brought home in an ambulance. As he was wheeled into the mansion, the familiar grandeur filled him with both hope and dread. He was home, but still a prisoner inside his own body, and inside the lie he had created. No one, not even him, knew how long this test would last. That was the most torturous part. The domestic staff gathered quietly at the entrance, their eyes filled with pity and uncertainty. Amaka walked beside him with a determined expression, though her eyes betrayed her emotional turmoil. "Welcome home, sir," Emmanuel said quietly as he pushed the wheelchair into the living room. Donald looked around, the home he once ruled now felt foreign. Amaka forced a smile. "I'll handle everything," she said softly to the nurses and aides. "We'll make this work." Donald watched her, wondering how long she could keep this up. The real battle was beginning, here in their home. Every day would test not only him but their marriage. Weeks blurred into months. The air between them grew heavier. Amaka still cared for him, but her strength was fading. The fire she once carried was dimming. She moved like a shadow, mechanical, drained, going through the motions. Donald watched her with a storm of emotions inside him. He thought he was ready for this, to witness her hardship, to observe every sign of loyalty or betrayal. But the reality was far more brutal. Every sigh, every pause, every tired expression pierced him a little deeper. Still, he stayed committed to the deception, desperate to uncover the truth. One evening, as the sun disappeared and the room dimmed, Amaka sat at the edge of his bed, shoulders slumped. She stared at her hands, eyes empty. A sharp pang of guilt went through Donald. He wanted to comfort her, hold her, tell her the truth, but he couldn't break character now. "Amaka," he said gently, "you've been doing so much. Maybe take a break. Go out. See friends. You don't have to be here constantly." She looked at him in surprise. "You want me to leave?" "No," he said quickly. "I just don't want you to feel trapped. You deserve rest." Her expression softened briefly before she looked away. "I wouldn't even know where to go," she murmured. "My whole life is in this room now." A lump formed in Donald's throat. This was his biggest fear, that his test had turned their marriage into a cage. Before he could reply, the doorbell rang. Emmanuel stepped inside, looking hesitant. "Madam, you have a visitor." Amaka frowned. "A visitor? Who?" "Ani," Emmanuel said quietly, a shadow crossing his face. "He said he came to check on you and Olga." Donald's heart skipped. Ani, an old acquaintance. Wealthy, charming, too smooth. Donald had always felt something off about him, especially where Amaka was concerned. Now he was back. This twist could expose everything, either proving Amaka's loyalty or revealing cracks Donald feared. "Should I send him away?" Amaka asked. "No," Donald said slowly. "Let him in." She nodded, puzzled, and left. Donald listened as her footsteps faded. His mind raced. Ani's presence would complicate everything. In the living room, Ani stood by the window, tall and polished. He smiled warmly when Amaka entered. "Amaka," he said, voice soft. "I came as soon as I heard." "It's been tough," she admitted. "But we're coping." Ani stepped closer, sympathy in his eyes. "I can't imagine how hard this is for you. If you need anything, anything at all, I'm here." His gaze lingered on her, longer than appropriate. Amaka forced a polite smile. "Thank you. But we're all right." You don't always have to be strong, he said gently. It's okay to admit when you're overwhelmed. Her eyes flickered, for a second, then she pushed the emotion away. I know, she said quietly. But I have to be strong for Donald. In the following days, Ani visited more frequently. He came under the pretense of checking on Donald, but his attention was directed at Amaka, the compliments, the lingering glances, the subtle attempts at closeness. It infuriated Donald to watch. Yet he remained silent, trapped by his own lie. He had set the stage, and now he had no choice but to endure whatever came next. One quiet afternoon, Ani showed up with a bottle of wine, insisting they should have a small gathering to lift everyone's spirits. Donald watched Amaka closely as she hesitated before agreeing, a flicker of reluctance passing over her face. They settled in the living room, Donald in his wheelchair, Amaka and Ani across from him. Ani poured the wine and handed Amaka a glass. To resilience, he said, raising his cup. To facing life's storms with grace. Amaka forced a weak smile and tapped her glass against his. Donald studied her quietly. He saw the tension in her eyes, the cracks in the calm front she tried so hard to maintain. The test was wearing them both down, but he stayed silent, waiting for the moment she might snap, or slip. Then, after a few drinks, Ani began telling stories from their younger days. To Donald's surprise, Amaka laughed, a sound so rare lately that it hit him like a punch. A jealous knot formed in his chest, and something darker. Fear. Was she finding comfort in Ani? Was he becoming the escape from the life she had been forced into because of Donald's condition? Ani turned to Donald with an overly sympathetic expression. How are you holding up, Donald? He asked, pretending to be concerned. This must be incredibly difficult for you. Donald forced a thin smile. It is, he said coolly. But we're coping. Ani nodded, glancing at Amaka. You're lucky to have such a strong woman by your side. Amaka lowered her gaze, her fingers circling the rim of her glass. I'm just doing what any wife would do, she murmured. Donald felt something twist painfully inside him. There it was, the uncertainty, the thing that haunted him. He wanted proof, something undeniable. It came on a rainy afternoon. Amaka was washing dishes when Ani showed up without warning. From his spot in the living room, Donald observed her reaction, surprised, bothered, unsettled. I didn't know you were coming, she said, avoiding his eyes. I just wanted to check on you, he replied, stepping closer. You seemed upset the last time we talked. Amaka glanced at Donald, who was watching them with a blank, unreadable look. I'm fine, she said tightly. You shouldn't come here without calling. Ani's eyes narrowed for a split second, but he quickly masked it with a charming smile. I was worried, he said softly. I know things are tough. I just want to help. Amaka crossed her arms, clearly torn. Ani, you need to leave. He moved even closer, voice dropping to a whisper. You don't have to keep pretending. There's no shame in wanting more than this, more than him. Donald's heart thundered. The audacity, the boldness, to come into his home and try to seduce his wife while he sat helpless. But this was it. This was the moment. Would Amaka bend? Would she crumble under the temptation? Amaka's expression hardened. She raised her hand and pointed at the door. Leave, she said, her voice trembling with anger and resolve. I love my husband. And I won't listen to another word. Shock flashed across Ani's face, quickly replaced by rage. Without speaking again, he stormed out, slamming the door. Amaka stood there shaking, breathing hard. Relief washed over Donald. She had chosen him, even after everything. But guilt hit just as quickly. She had only gone through this ordeal because of him. You knew what he was trying to do, she said later, her voice trembling with hurt. And you let him keep coming. You never complained, you never stopped him. That's not like you at all. Why? Donald froze. The truth pressed against his chest. He looked at her, the woman who had cared for him, fought for him, stayed loyal even in the darkest moments. How could he explain? I needed to know, he said finally, voice shaking. I needed to know if you loved me, or if you only loved what I could give you, my money, my status. Amaka's eyes widened. She stumbled back, hand on her chest. You needed to know, she whispered. So you put me through all of this, just to test me? His throat tightened. He had imagined this confrontation, but not like this. Amaka, please, he said. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted the truth. She let out a bitter, broken laugh. The truth? The truth is you never trusted me. You doubted my love from the beginning. And instead of talking to me, instead of trusting me, you trapped me in this sick game. He reached toward her, his hand trembling. I was scared, he admitted, tears blurring his eyes. I was terrified that you only loved the life I provided. She stared at him, tears gathering. So you pretended to be paralyzed, she demanded. You made me live inside a lie every single day, just to prove yourself right. He swallowed, guilt choking him. I didn't know any other way. I needed to see how you'd act when everything was gone. Her tears finally spilled over. You didn't take everything away, she whispered. You took trust. You took honesty. You made me carry a burden that wasn't real. I cared for you, I worried for you, I cried for you, and you turned it into a test. He bowed his head, devastated. I was wrong, he whispered. I see that now. I see how deeply I've wounded you, and us. Amaka turned away, her shoulders shaking. You still don't understand, she said through her tears. It's not just the lie. It's that you never believed in me. You didn't trust my heart. And now, her voice broke. Now I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Her words hit him like a physical blow, the full weight of his actions settling deep into his bones. The truth now hung between them, cold, sharp, and impossible to ignore. He had tested her, doubted her, and in doing so had shattered the very foundation of their marriage. Amaka, he pleaded, his voice breaking, I know I've damaged something between us. But please, let me fix this. Give me a chance. She didn't turn around. For a long, torturous moment, she just stood there with her back to him, her sobs the only sound in the room. Then, slowly, she lifted her head and faced him. How do you fix something you deliberately broke? She asked, her voice empty. You made me live a nightmare, Donald. You made me question my own sanity, my own love. How do we come back from that? Donald opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He had no explanation, no miracle answer, only a crushing guilt and the faint, fragile hope that she could one day forgive him. Amaka wiped the tears from her cheeks, her expression tightening. I need time, she said softly, her voice eerily calm. Time to think, to figure out whether I can ever look at you the same way again. She turned and headed for the door, her movements stiff, like she was holding herself together by force. Donald watched in panic. Amaka, he whispered. But she didn't stop. She didn't even glance back. The door closed behind her, sealing the house in a suffocating silence. Donald sat there, staring at the space she'd left behind, feeling the weight of his choices settle over him like a heavy shroud. He had set out to test her love, but in the end, all he had done was expose his own flaws, his insecurities, and his deepest fears. Later that night, long after the house had gone dark, Donald lay awake replaying every moment of the day. The look in Amaka's eyes when she learned the truth, the raw pain, the betrayal. He had crushed something precious, something he wasn't sure could ever be repaired. The bedroom door creaked open softly. Donald turned, expecting to see Amaka. Instead, Emmanuel stepped inside, his face stern and troubled. Emmanuel, Donald croaked, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. Emmanuel approached the bed, disappointment clouding his eyes. "Olga, this has gone too far," he said quietly. "I warned you. I told you this plan would destroy more than it fixed." Donald swallowed hard, guilt burning in his chest. "I know," he whispered. "I know that now. But what do I do? How do I make this right?" Emmanuel sighed deeply and rubbed his face. "Olga, some wounds can't be healed just by talking. You've hurt her deeply. This isn't about who's right anymore, it's about trust. And you've broken that trust." Tears welled in Donald's eyes. "I don't want to lose her, Emmanuel. I thought this was the only way to know if she really loved me." Emmanuel shook his head slowly. "Love can't survive without trust. Without it, love is just a word. Give her time. Give her space. Let her decide what she wants." Donald closed his eyes as tears slipped down his face. "Maybe I don't deserve her forgiveness." "Maybe not," Emmanuel answered softly. "But that's for her to decide, not you." In her room, Amaka sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her heart felt torn in two. She had loved Donald with everything she had cared for him without complaint, only to discover she'd been living inside a lie, a twisted test of her loyalty. The realization made her stomach turn with grief and anger. She hugged her knees to her chest, her thoughts spiraling. Ani's words echoed in her mind, "You don't have to do this alone." And for a moment, a brief, terrifying moment, she had felt the temptation of escape. That fleeting thought scared her. She had chosen Donald over and over again. Yet he had still doubted her. Could she forgive him? Could she look at him without remembering that every tear, every sacrifice, had been part of a setup? She didn't know. The uncertainty crushed her. Amaka stood and began pacing the room, her emotions twisting into a storm. Donald's deception had cut her deeper than any blade. The man she loved now felt like a stranger, one capable of hurting her in ways she never imagined. Her gaze shifted to her phone on the nightstand. She couldn't stay here. Not another minute. She grabbed her bag and shoved in a few clothes, snatched her phone and keys, and slipped out of the room. She didn't want to see him. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The hallway was quiet. Emmanuel was nowhere around, which she took as a small mercy. She moved toward the front door, her breath trembling. At the door, she paused for one last look at the house, at the life that had changed forever. Then she stepped outside into the cool night. Amaka drove through the empty streets, the hum of the engine the only sound. Her hands clenched the steering wheel as tears blurred her vision. Her mind replayed everything, the doubts, the lies, the betrayal. How could he, she whispered brokenly. She needed to get away. To breathe, to think, without the weight of Donald's deception crushing her chest. The farther she drove, the more the storm inside her raged. Amaka knew exactly where she needed to go, her parents' home. It had always been the one place where she could breathe, think, and find comfort. Tonight, she needed that more than ever. She needed a refuge. But as she turned onto the highway leading out of town, bright headlights suddenly flared in her rearview mirror. A black SUV trailed close behind her, hugging her bumper. A frown creased her brow. Why is this car following me? She increased her speed slightly, hoping the vehicle would overtake her. It didn't. It stayed glued to her, matching every adjustment she made. Her pulse spiked. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Before she could process the danger, the SUV swerved violently and slammed into the side of her car. The impact sent her skidding off the road. Amaka screamed as the vehicle spun out of control, sliding into a ditch and crashing to a harsh stop. Her chest heaved as she tried to collect herself, but she didn't get the chance. The SUV screeched to a halt beside her. Two masked men leapt out and tore open her door. "No, let go of me," she shouted, kicking wildly. But their strength overpowered her. One man clamped a gloved hand over her mouth, muffling her screams. The other tied her wrists tightly with rope. They hauled her out of the car, her feet dragging helplessly in the dirt. "Keep her quiet," one of them barked. The other man pulled out a cloth and pressed it over her mouth and nose. A thick, chemical scent filled her lungs. Her vision swam, the world tilted, and everything went black. Amaka had been taken. Back at home, Donald sat alone in his room, crushed under the silence that followed her departure. The weight of their argument clung to him like chains. His phone rang. Distracted and exhausted, he answered without checking the caller ID. "Hello, Mr. Donald," a cold, unfamiliar voice hissed. "Your wife is with us." Donald froze, his blood icing over. "What? Who is this? What are you talking about?" A low, chilling chuckle drifted through the receiver. "You heard me. We have Amaka. If you want her alive, you'll pay 100 million naira." Donald's mind reeled. This must be a sick joke," he stammered. "Who are you?" "No joke, Mr. Donald," the voice snapped, the humor vanishing. "We know you're wealthy. You can afford it, 100 million. Or say goodbye to your precious wife." Donald's grip tightened around the phone. "How do I know you're not lying? Let me speak to her." But something terrible had already happened. Comment the biggest lesson you learned from part 1, and subscribe so you're first to see part 2 when it drops. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.